When it comes to sharing your faith or asking someone else about theirs, have you ever experienced what I call a missed opportunity? You know, those moments that you keep replaying in your mind as you think back over your conversation? Maybe the other person made a passing comment and you just let it slide by. Maybe it was a moment of awkward silence and you really didn't know what to say. Or perhaps you just wished you had asked a different or better question. We all know that we should be better listeners, but what exactly should we be listening for? Well, welcome back to the Living Sent podcast. On today's episode, we are talking about 4 listening cues that will literally change your next conversation. You can listen for these cues within the context of a gospel conversation. Yes, that's true. But more than that, they really can be applied to any conversation you have. If you are new to the podcast, we release a new episode on the first Wednesday of each month with the purpose of helping you, in about 20 minutes or less, live like an everyday missionary in your household, neighborhood, workplace, and city. And my promise to you is that I will work crazy hard to produce quality content that helps you do just that. Well, it's exciting to see this podcast community continue to grow, and I absolutely love hearing from you. And so I wanted to read to you one of the latest reviews that I received. It's from Strider12, and Strider writes, "Awesome pod. This podcast is encouraging and helpful. I wish there were more like it. It challenges listeners to become all that Christ is calling them to be." Here's another one, and I hope I get this right. It's from EVDB89 2011. They write, "Love it. So encouraging for every Christ follower. Such practical ideas to adopt in your daily habits. What was Jesus doing? He was living sent." Awesome. Thank you both so much. I hope you can feel me giving you a podcast high five right now. Thank you so much for the feedback. Like I said before, my promise to you is that I will work really hard to produce quality content that brings value not only to you, but also to your church, to your organization. And it would mean the world to me if you would take just a moment to rate and review this podcast wherever you listen to it. Just like Strider12 did and EVDB89 2011, each review or shared podcast really is like a gift to me, and it really does help to expand the reach of this content to others. So a huge thank you to you in advance. I shared last month some exciting news, and that is my new book, Living Sent, is now available for purchase in both paperback and ebook formats. And I've got a very special offer to give to you as a member of this podcast community. Through the end of the year, I'll be offering my book to this podcast community at a 40% discount. And all you have to do is type in the discount code TLSP22. It stands for The Living Sent Podcast 22. Here it is again. TLSP22, and you will receive the discount at checkout. That means when you take advantage of this book will be cheaper than Amazon. Let me say that again. It will be cheaper than Amazon when you purchase it directly through my website. So I hope you take full advantage of that and share it with a friend, because this is only going to be available through the end of the year. And if you're the type of person who likes to go deeper into the content we discussed during our time together, or maybe you like to reflect on the podcasts that you listen to and digest them slowly, then you need to check out the show notes. I make each episode's show notes available to you completely free on my website. A quick note on my show notes: these are not a word-for-word transcription of each episode. You can listen to this podcast and get that. Instead, the show notes consolidate the main thoughts, they ask deeper questions, and they give you additional resources so that you or a team or a small group or whoever can take the conversation to the next level. So to get them, head over to my website, navigate to the podcast tab, and you can download any episode's notes for free. All right, let's get into new content for today. 4 listening cues that will change your next conversation. Most of you are probably familiar with the idea of a body language cue, so a nonverbal signal that someone sends to you. Maybe the other person crossed their arms when you said something that was very direct. Maybe the other person made eye contact, nodded their head slowly up and down while you were telling a relatable story. Maybe you have kids and they put their hands on their hips, they lowered their brow, they puckered their lips, and they leaned slightly forward when you said, no, you cannot eat ice cream and Skittles for dinner. Whatever the case may be, you know about body language cues. We all give and receive these types of cues on a daily basis. But what if I told you that there are 4 listening cues that, if picked up on and acted on, could literally change your next conversation? Would you be interested in that? So in terms of having a gospel conversation with someone, these 4 listening cues can help you speak the truths of the gospel in a more relatable way. In terms of having a conversation with someone over lunch or dinner, these 4 cues can help you ask more engaging questions with the person seated across from you. In terms of having a conversation with someone you just met, these 4 cues can help you instantly connect with almost anyone. So what do I mean by a listening cue? A listening cue. Think of a listening cue in terms of a spoken signal to you, the listener, that helps you be more connected, engaged, and relatable in conversation. So let me give you that definition again. First, a listening cue is a spoken signal. So while the other person is talking, they are giving you conversational indicators. Again, these are not nonverbal cues as with body language. These are verbal cues that you can learn to pick up on. So it's a spoken signal that does what? It helps you be more connected, engaged, and relatable in conversation. So in other words, once you pick up on the listening cue, you will be able to dig deeper in that conversation because you'll be working out of a framework that I'm going to share with you in just a moment. So let me share with you where this framework comes from. It actually comes from the story of the gospel, and let me explain what I mean by that. In our Live Sent training, we talk extensively about how the story of the gospel can be summarized into 4 big movements. The movements are creation, fall, redemption, and restoration. Creation, fall, redemption, and restoration. And you can really summarize the entire Bible with these 4 movements. Now, you may be familiar with those words, but if you're not, let me give you a quick explanation of what I mean by each. Number 1, creation. So in the beginning of the Bible, God chose to create all things, including humanity. He created man and woman in a special way, the Bible says, in his own image. And he placed them in a beautiful garden where they experienced perfect relationships with creation, with one another, and with God himself. It was utter paradise. Fall. As the story of the Bible unfolds, the first humans chose to rebel against God's command. They decided to live their own way instead of God's way. And the Bible calls this sin. So after Adam and Eve rebelled against God, their perfect relationships with creation, with one another, with God himself, they had been fractured. And as time went on, sin began to spread to all people. And all the generations that followed really lived in a sin-fractured and broken world, choosing their own way instead of God's way. Redemption. In God's great mercy and love, he initiated a rescue mission. The Old Testament really chronicles how this rescue mission unfolds. And throughout the Old Testament, God is promising his chosen people, the Jews, that one day soon he would send the Messiah, that is Jesus Christ, who would ultimately complete this mission and rescue humanity. Now, Jesus was crucified on humanity's behalf, taking in his own body the punishment for sin that humanity really deserved. And here's where this gets good for you. God accepted Jesus' sacrifice in place of yours. And so now by believing in him, you can once again be at peace with God and live according to his ways and under his rule. God is bringing all things back to the way they originally were. restoration. Jesus promised that one day soon he would return to earth to bring all of this, what we're just talking about, to its complete fullness. And at that time, he's going to restore everything to the way that it was intended to be. A world with no more evil, no more sin, no more rebellion, a world with no more sickness or pain or death. It will be utter paradise, just like it was in the beginning. Creation, fall, redemption, restoration. Why did I share that with you? Because this is the basis, really, of the 4 listening cues. And here are the 4 listening cues: beginnings, brokenness, betterment, and blessings. Let me say them again. Beginnings, brokenness, betterment, and blessings. So let me explain. Just like the story of the Bible starts with creation, every person's story, every person's life story has a beginning. Just as the story of the Bible speaks about the fall, every person has experienced brokenness of some kind. Just as the story of the Bible anticipates redemption, every person is pursuing betterment in some measure. And just as the story of the Bible longs for restoration, every person hopes for future blessings. You see, our lives are full of beginnings when you really think about it. Yes, we have a literal beginning, when we were created and then the day we were born. But beyond that, we have multiple beginnings throughout life. When you wake up, you experience a literal beginning. It's a new day. When you start a new job or a career, that's a beginning. When you go to a new school, when you get married, when you have children, all of those are types of beginnings in life. We all have beginnings. But our lives are also full of brokenness as well. I've never met a person who is unfamiliar with pain, heartache, suffering, and hurt. And as one popular evangelist has famously said, pain, not love, is the universal language of all humanity. Our lives are full of brokenness. And likewise, every person is pursuing betterment in some measure. People are actively pursuing things they believe will make their lives better. I've never met someone actively trying to make their life worse. Nobody does that. They're all trying to make their life better in some measure. And then finally, blessings. People have a picture of their ideal future. They really do. They have an idea of what the good life looks like. Don't you? Picture a perfect world. Picture your ideal future. Who's there? What's there? How does it feel? Everyone is hoping for future blessings. Beginnings, brokenness, betterment, and blessing. So now that you have the 4 listening cues, I want to perform a little experiment with you. I'm going to read you a real story from a real person, and I want you to see if you can pick out these 4 listening cues in the story. Again, beginnings, brokenness, betterment, and blessing. Here it is. She mentioned that she grew up poor and that often her family struggled to make ends meet. Money was always a source of frustration within her household. Her clothes were frequently too small and out of style, showing signs of being handed down from sibling to sibling. On top of that, food was scarce. Memories of going hungry or eating half-prepared meals while rushing from place to place were all too common as she talked about her humble beginnings. As she continued to share, her relationship with her parents clearly caused the deepest pain. As the family finances worsened, so did her relationship with her parents. She mentioned that she was repeatedly put down and made to feel like she had to prove herself in order to be loved. Repeated name-calling and harsh punishment left her internally defeated, and she began to wonder if she was to blame for what she was experiencing in life. At some point, she decided she had enough. She determined to work her way out of her situation. Intellectually gifted and already receiving good grades in school, she devised a simple yet effective plan. Education would be her escape. with a little bit more focus and a little bit more effort, she would excel, and a new purpose began to emerge in her life. Giving her all to education would ensure that she got into a good university, which would lead to securing a decent job and hopefully becoming financially independent along the way. She resolved to be nothing like and live nothing like her past. This idea led her to pursue her current job, and she began to express her hopes for what her future would bring and what she could provide for her future family. The wealth she was experiencing was completely different than her dark past, and she hinted that she fully expected it would bring her peace and security and happiness. By securing a good job with a consistent salary, she would finally be given the respect she deserved and experience the fulfillment she so desperately craved. So did you hear it? Beginnings, brokenness, betterment, and blessings. And that's a real story from a real person. So what's going on here? When people share about their beginnings, they're really answering the question, how did I get here? Who or what are they crediting or blaming for where they are in life? Do they blame others? Do they credit themselves? When people speak about beginnings, they're really answering the question, how did I get here? Now, when people begin sharing about brokenness, they're really answering the question, why are things this way? Why is the world not as it should be? Why do people experience unloving families and social injustices, loneliness, abandonment, unexplained illness, death, murder, hatred, greed, lies, corruption? When people speak about brokenness, they're answering the question, why are things this way? When people begin sharing about betterment, they're really answering the question, what can make life better? Some may search for it through relationships, believing the solution is somewhere to be found in romance or in marriage. Some take the self-improvement route. Maybe it's through worldly success or personal enrichment, education, pleasure. The list could go on. When people speak about betterment, they are answering the question, what can make life better? And finally, when people begin sharing about blessings, they're really answering the question, what will life be like when all is well? Peace, love, security, equality, respect, happiness, fulfillment, whatever a person pictures when they close their eyes and they imagine that perfect world, those are blessings. And when people talk about them, they're really answering the question, what will life be like when all is well? Now, as you begin to rehearse this in your mind, you will start to hear it more and more in the conversations you have with others. Beginnings, brokenness, betterment, and blessings. These will start to become your 4 listening cues that change your conversations. Now, hear me on this. You may not get every listening cue in every conversation. In fact, most of the time, you're only going to get 1 or maybe even 2. But whatever the case may be, you can begin to work within this framework to help you connect, engage, and relate to anyone you are speaking with. And this really is what Living Sent is all about. This is what talking with others about Jesus is all about. The gospel is the true story, and it offers answers to these fundamental questions that everyone is asking. And so by becoming fluent in the story of the gospel, it can help you speak truth into people's lives, producing these ongoing gospel conversations, these open doors for talking with others about Jesus. If you'd like to grab the show notes for today's episode, hop over to my website, go to the podcast tab, and there you can download today's or really any previous episode's notes for free. If you found this episode valuable and helpful to you personally, consider sharing it with a friend or writing a review wherever you listen. Well, that's all for today. And remember this, you don't have to live sent, you get to. We'll see you next time.